Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hazmat Files podcast. I'm your host, Erica Fisher. This show is dedicated to the topics that matter most to our first responders and the communities they serve, from hazardous materials to emergency response and transportation safety. If you're passionate about public safety, community readiness, and staying informed on hazmat response, you're in the right place. Before we get started, a quick note. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guest, and do not necessarily reflect the positions or opinions of TransCare or its sponsoring organization. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or professional advice. Today's episode focuses on the critical role railroads play in safely transporting the materials that keep our economy moving. Safety in this space isn't just a priority, it's a responsibility. Rail companies like CSX are leading the way by embedding safety into every level of their operations through what they call their standard of care. From incident response to long-term community engagement, CSX's standard of care represents a holistic commitment to operational integrity, environmental stewardship, and public safety. Joining us today is someone who lives and breathes these values, Michael Scully. Mike is the Assistant Vice President of the Risk Management and Law Department at CSX Transportation. His duties include overseeing 500 single casualties, class action, and property damage lawsuits for CSX and its affiliates. He also heads their crisis response team and has led the community response for dozens of major derailments across the 26 states in which CSX operates. He also serves as the executive director at the Association of American Railroads, GCC board. Mike has been with CSX for over 25 years. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks, Erica. I appreciate that introduction. And for your audience, we'll spare them the details of all the hoops we had to jump through to make this happen. But main thing is it's happening, and I'm here, and I'm happy to talk to you today.
We really appreciate you taking the opportunity to be here. Let's dive into what makes CSX's standard of care such a cornerstone of your operations. Mike, could you start by giving us an overview of the key aspects of these guiding principles?
Sure. Obviously, there's a lot to it. We could go through some of the buzzwords like be transparent, those sort of things. But really, it boils down to restore normalcy to the community. And that's a very oversimplification. And what that really means is take care of the community. When our operations impacts a community in a negative way, we have a responsibility to care for that community. And not just in a macro level, but basically at a micro level, the mind and body, which is huge. We have to make the communities feel cared for on an individual basis. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. We have to show up, and you have to do it in a timely fashion. You can't just kind of sit back and say, we'll wait to see what the public thinks, or if the press picks this up, or see what kind of response we need to do. If you wait to do that, you've already lost. So we have a very high standard of care from the outset. So we know when something happens, we go to work. And our number one goal is the residents, the people. That's number one. Then obviously the environment. We got to take care of the environment. And if you do a good job with the environment, that also takes care of the people. Those people are going to live there long after the response is over. So the environment is huge. And then our operations. We're a company that has obligations to our customers, but also obligations to the infrastructure of this country. A lot of the things that we're hauling keep the lights on and keep the power plants going. We keep the fuel in automobiles so people can get to work. You go to the restaurant, when you order chicken, we're probably bringing food to those chickens. There's so many things that we do to support the country that we have to be mindful of, but first and foremost, do those things in the proper order. Is take care of the people, the environment, and then we'll get back to running trains. To go back to the way I started, restoring normalcy to the community, sometimes we have to realize, depending on the size of the incident, that there might be a new normal. And we have to keep in mind what's the best way to get to the best possible outcome and to the new normal. It may be a smaller incident where normalcy is just the way it was, but we've seen these type of incidents, and you could see just recently the big explosion down in Louisiana at the Smitty's plant. That community will likely have a new normalcy. And you saw there was an explosion the other day in Pennsylvania I think it was at the U.S. Steel plant. Another new normalcy. We have a responsibility to the communities to make sure that we get them to either their baseline normalcy or their new normalcy best possible way.
It's so refreshing to hear that CSX is putting people first, both their own, but also the communities that they serve. And it is important, as you said, to keep those products and the economy moving with things that are essential to our daily lives. Let's shift to incident response. What happens when the unexpected occurs? What are the immediate steps CSX takes following a rail incident to ensure community safety and environmental protections are in place?
Well, I think we have to start assuming this is derailment or an incident on the train with hazardous materials. We start at the beginning. The train crews are the ones that are going to be first contacting either our dispatcher or emergency response folks. They have the consist of the train, and they're kind of our eyes and ears. They can tell us about where in the train the derailment occurred. Sometimes there's a fire involved, sometimes there's not. It just all depends on the type of derailment, but they would be our best indication of what's going on. They'll call the dispatcher. The dispatcher will ask questions like, do you know where about this derailment is, part of your train? And they have this form that they carry with them. It's called the CT-168, and that CT-168 is basically a train consist that tells you in what train order these cars are. The conductor can say, well, I can see the derailments in the last third of my train. Well, we can eliminate maybe the first 2/3 and say, okay, there's 40 cars in the train in the last third, and 20 of those are hazmat, so we have a very high likelihood of a hazmat derailment. Now, not all hazmats, as you know, are a danger to the public per se, so now we have to identify what is in those 20 cars. Just because they're hazmat, they take a different level of response. Once we identify that, they will hand that paperwork off to first responders when they arrive. And the first responders will obviously try to pinpoint, do we have any issues here with the derailment? And once that's identified and all this is going on at the scene and behind the scene, I'm doing the same thing, trying to figure out, okay, we have this derailment and my team's looking at, okay, what are the possibilities here? Do we have a chlorine car, for example, or do we have an ammonia car? Do we have some of these TIHPH cars that have a whole nother level of response? All those type of things we're trying to identify early on. And I'll tell you, Erica, with live streaming and social media, and I don't know what the percentage of people that have drones nowadays, but a lot of times I'll go right on Facebook and some of these social media companies, Instagram, and I'll see if anybody's posting anything, because a lot of times if this is in someone's backyard, they'll go right to Facebook Live and live stream it. And we've gotten some fantastic information from folks, just passerbyers, neighbors, just members of the community that will actually live stream something like that, and we can actually see in real time what's going on, which 20 years ago, that was something we never even thought was possible. That is a great tool that we can use just to get ahead of it. Also, another thing I think it's interesting to mention too, and this has happened a few times, where you may have one commodity that's maybe breached, and 10 cars away you have another commodity that's breached, and separately they're fine. But if you put them together, you could have a real problem. So sometimes it gets a little more complicated than just seeing what an individual commodity is, because sometimes you have to look at how are they going to play together. So it can get kind of complicated on how do you want to formulate a response. So all this is to say, what is the best way to protect the public? We want to make sure that we get this information to the folks that can make decisions on how to best protect the public, and do that obviously in a timely fashion to lessen any type of exposure. We utilize Chemtrack and any of those type of companies that help us make those decisions too. We rely on the experts because there's just so many different commodities and so many different things, a lot of moving parts to identify early on to protect the community.
As you said, a lot of moving parts and a lot of teams involved. And with the different teams involved, coordination is key during emergencies. How does CSX work with local emergency agencies and first responders after an incident occurs? Are there any pre-established agreements or MOUs in place?
Yeah, there's countless protocols around training initiatives that we're constantly doing, how many local, state agencies we're training a year. along with the first responders. I think it's over 6,000 last year. We're on pace to do over 6,000 again this year. So the training obviously is huge. One of the things on our hazmat team, they have MOUs with, say, the local first responders. Just to give you an example of Baltimore. We have radios that we can communicate directly to Baltimore city officials. And we have that type of MOU set up in hundreds and hundreds of different areas. So we're all on the same channel, and that is huge. Communication in these type of events is key.
CSX and all the railroads do a tremendous amount of outreach to first responders and training, as well as drills and exercises. Community engagement is another major element of preparedness. How does CSX involve local leaders and residents in emergency planning, both before and after rail incidents occur?
So again, to touch on the training, just a couple weeks ago, and I think I saw you there, we had the big training here in DC where we trained hundreds of first responders all the way to staff officials in Congress. That's how you plant the seeds of your response. Our hazmat folks, they have this saying, when we have an incident, we want to say, how are you, not who are you? And I think it was a few years back, we had an incident where we had just trained the fire chief in an incident. So when we got there, we knew exactly who he was and he knew who we were. And you said something very important here, is before and after. Obviously, before is key. We just talked about some of the reasons why, but after is what can we learn from this incident? What can we do better? What did we do right? And we're always constantly trying to learn, and that's how you learn. And one of the things, we interviewed the fire chief, I think, afterwards, and he said, when you trained me, you told me this was going to happen, you told me this was going to happen, and you told me this was going to happen, and all those things happened. So I was prepared, and I planned for it, and everything that you said that was going to happen happened. It really made the incident more cohesive in kind of an organized chaos way, which anybody that's been to one of these, especially the first 48 hours, is pretty chaotic. But when you have that background training where you can anticipate, oh, they told me that this was going to happen, they told me that this was the next step, that was really fantastic feedback. And it's one of the reasons why we do it, because we've learned, companies over 150 years old, we've learned from our mistakes and we've learned from the things that we do right. Training regulators, training our government agency, training our lawmakers, and training our first responders beforehand, it's key. Obviously, the communication around that during an incident and then doing a kind of a hot wash at the end, all those things are kind of a best practice.
Lessons learned can turn into valuable improvements to take on to the next incident, and learning from past incidents is critical. And for CSX, support doesn't end when the tracks are cleared. While trains may be moving, CSX still provides support to communities in the aftermath of an incident. Can you explain what some of those resources are and ways CSX supports communities following the incident?
Sure. I think if you think about the best way to answer this question is put yourself there. You live half a mile from the tracks, you have a derailment, you're asked to leave your home in the middle of the night. Obviously, you don't have a lot of time, so maybe you're grabbing your purse or your wallet, your cell phone, off you go. You're probably not going to go to work the next day. If you have your kids, the kids probably aren't going to be in school. CSX, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, about what we actually do for the community. It might be a good time for me to talk about it now, but is we're going to put the community member in a hotel. Of course, we'll pay for all that. There's so many things. You don't know how long you're going to be out, and obviously we don't either. We don't know the extent of the derailment or what's spilled, what's on fire, and when it will be extinguished. We'll do air monitoring, not only during the incident, but we'll do it after the incident. We'll make sure the air monitoring is in the community. We'll even do air monitors in people's homes if that's required, necessary, or if they ask for it just for peace of mind, we'll actually do that. There's all these things that are going to go on, but then when we're given the all clear, CSX realizes you haven't been able to work for 2 or 3 or 4 days, or however long it is. You may have some out-of-pocket expenses. You may have gone to Walmart or something and bought some clothing or whatever it is, out-of-pocket expenses. You're going to have those too. We know just because you were out of your house for 4 or 5 days, you're still going to have to make your house payment. You're still going to have to make your rent. You're still going to have to pay the power bill. All these things, we're going to compensate folks in a very timely fashion. Generally speaking, within a day or two of the time that you're back in your home, We'll have an outreach center already set up, and we'll have our check writers there, and we'll invite the community to come in and get compensated for their out-of-pocket expenses, their lost wages, and also we'll be including a monetary amount for inconvenience for all the things that they had to go through to each household. We'll also extend that to businesses as well. I remember a few years ago, we had shut down a pretty large-sized manufacturing outfit with around 3,000 UAW workers. I think they were shut down for 24 hours, so there's 3 shifts. Instead of having 3,000 individual claims and 3,000 people take time out of their day to come see us, we made a deal with the owners of the company that, hey, pay everyone as if they worked and let us know, and they will square up with you. So folks didn't even miss anything on their checks, and things were seamless. So again, this experience that we've had, unfortunately, doing these things a few times, we know that is a big deal for folks to interrupt their lives like that, and we want to make sure that the things that we can control, we control. So that's some of the things that we do.
It's really great to hear CSX's dedication to really making the community whole again, but also really making each individual household and business whole again following an incident. And Mike, you mentioned earlier the importance of communication during these incidents. And while understanding that every incident or derailment is different, how quickly are emergency managers and the public informed following a rail incident?
I think I went through a little bit about the steps right after it happens, how the conductor has the hazmat consist, what is train car number 75, that sort of thing. Once that's called into our dispatcher will relay that information to our PSEC center. Then we'll reach out to first responders immediately. Depending on the incident, they may already be called. Somebody in the community at large may have called it in. Again, we talk about timeliness is so key, and we'll get eyes on it right away. And then the local first responders will make that determination right away, not the railroad. Our job is just to relay information, and their job is to protect the community. So they'll make that determination. We will give them the most and best accurate information we can possibly give them as quickly as we possibly can. And then they make that determination, and they'll go door to door and let folks know what they need to do. They'll blast it on social media, usually on the community page. A lot of times they'll have the 911 callback, which is a really nice feature where they will call every phone. Not a lot of folks have landlines anymore. So they actually have a system now where they can text everyone in a localized area based on towers that there's been this accident, and if you're in this location, you need to take yourself to a place of safety. With technology, there's all these new tools now to get people notified. If we've got folks in the area, we'll certainly assist in going door to door with maybe our railroad police department, but generally speaking, we're not quite there yet. We're probably mobilizing to that area. I mean, we have over 20,000 miles of railroad tracks and over 100,000 railroad crossings, so we're pretty spread out. There are times that we'll be within a range to assist in those type of things.
Mike, you make a really good point there as well, that I think communities should understand that when it does come to evacuation and sheltering in place, it is up to the authority having jurisdiction to make those notifications and decisions. And while it's critical for them to make those decisions within unified command, including the railroad as part of that structure, it is ultimately up to the local jurisdiction to make those notifications. Beyond that initial response, we've discussed how important long-term care is for the community. And we've discussed that CSX will do air monitoring and other remediation following an incident. How is the community kept in the loop regarding long-term care and the plans that CSX has following an incident?
Yeah, Erica, that's huge, because if you put yourself there, if you lived in that community, obviously you'd want to know what's going on there. So transparency is huge. I'd say with our corporate communications department, they're huge on transparency. We'll have a dedicated webpage activated specifically to give up-to-date information on those sorts of things. We have made air monitoring, testing results readily available so people can look at those sort of things in almost real time, like what's going on. And if there's a long-term remediation process, obviously CSX doesn't determine when something is quote-unquote safe or safe levels. That's all with the state, local, and federal EPAs. we'll partner with those folks. When you go to one of these incidents, it's just remarkable to me to see the synergy between CSX and these agencies, because we're all working for the same thing. We're all working to restore normalcy to the community, to put people first and put the environment right up there with the people. We're working in partnership. We're kind of the railroad expertise, and we hire unbelievably smart people, great contractors, experts in the environment. And then they work with the state regulators, federal regulators, on what's the best way to fix the environment. There are times where you can just clean something up and it's good to go and off you go. And there are times where you know you're going to be there for years and years to monitor the situation. We'll be there as long as we have to be to make sure that the public is protected.
As we've discussed, for those affected, recovery can be a long road. What compensation or claims process is in place for individuals or businesses impacted by a rail incident?
That's a great question. This is the question I have to get in a little bit more detail of what a typical response with evacuation might look like on CSX risk management end. So we get the call. I'm immediately doing a lot of things. I've got my team on alert and they're doing certain things. We all have our tasks, but I'm looking at where is it? This could be a train that's a mile long, so a lot can happen in a city in a mile. I already been talking to our dispatcher and we're getting an idea of what part of the train this might be. Maybe we've gotten from the conductor, this may be near this road, which is very helpful information. So we have an idea of what road crossing it's at. And I may have an idea already of what the commodities are in the train and what we might be looking at. I'm looking at how many homes do we have? Are there hospitals nearby? Are there schools? What time of day is it? There's all these things that are going through our protocols. And then say there's a fire and there's going to be a mile evacuation, and that's what's being ordered. So that we're really going to work then. So now we're mobilizing. We're trying to get there. That is so key. For us, we've been through this before. We know what to expect. But it's so important to put yourself in that family's shoes. It's 2:00 in the morning. You got someone knocking on your door telling you have to leave your house right now. There's no packing your bags. You have to go right now. So out the door you go. You may grab your cell phone. You may have a purse. You may have a wallet. And that's it. You're out the door. So you don't know where to go. So you're going to the community center telling you everyone go to the high school, which is outside the evacuation zone. And there'll be further instructions when you get there. That's what's going on in the community. Just mass chaos. It's hectic. People are scared. And we know that because we've gone through this before. And I've talked to thousands of folks this has happened to. To my bones, I want to help these people. And my team is the same way. We want to get there. We want to help as many people as we can as soon as we possibly can. Again, taking care of people, mind and body. I'm also activating our 800 numbers. So we partner with a company called Avium. Their core business is disaster response and counseling. They cut their teeth in the aviation industry. So they have, as you can imagine, the worst type of disasters, right? When a plane crashes. So they're very skilled at handling phone calls in this type of situation. So we'll activate that 800 number and we'll publish it so folks can call that 800 number 24/7. I can have as many as 100 operators up and going within an hour. That's one of the things we're doing. I'm talking with corporate communications. We're trying to get a press release together. We're activating our website. We're trying to get the public as much information as we possibly can as soon as we can possibly do it. Accurate, timely, and transparent information. We also have what we call our care team. So similar to what a lot of the airlines have, we have over 100 CSX managers that are across the system that are trained to respond to something like this that we can deploy to anywhere in our 26 states, trained and ready. So at that point, I will determine how many of those folks that we need to deploy, keeping in mind how long this may go. We may want to hold a few people back to rotate some fresh people in. We're not going to cut it short, but we're not going to send too many. We're going to keep that in mind, but we're going to make sure that the community is covered. Our job is to get there and help the community as quickly as we possibly can. And we know that from our training. We've done a lot of training on crisis response. And we've learned there's this thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And people often don't think of psychologically, what are you thinking about when a crisis response? They're always talking about the nuts and bolts of a crisis response, right? Okay, you do this and then you do that. But when I say mind and body, that's what that means. We know that psychologically, when people are in distress, and this is a distressful situation, that people can revert to the mindset of even a toddler. And this has clinically been proven. So their decision making can be hindered. They don't know what to do. It's one of the things when, Erica, you've seen this before, when someone has terrible bad news to tell someone. The first thing they say is, well, you may want to sit down. Well, why do they need to sit down? Because you can actually lose equilibrium when you get bad news. It's part of the psychological process. And the same thing can happen in these crisis response situations. And I've seen it firsthand where normal people that get up and go to work every day and they come home, they pay their mortgage, they pay their electric bill, and they contribute to society, all of a sudden really lose the ability to function. And it's not because they're weak, it's just a psychological reaction. That is our time for us to show up, who have been through this before, to say, hey, we've got this. We're going to help you. We're going to send you to this hotel. We're going to staff this hotel with CSX personnel, not contractors, CSX personnel. We will be there to help you 24/7. Here's a 1-800 number for you to call 24/7 if you just want to call someone else, but we're going to be here. Here's the hospital. We'll set up a hospital to do direct billing. If you want to get checked out, you go to this hospital, we'll pay for it. Here's 3 restaurants. We've already told them that you may be coming to eat. You go there and you eat, and we will pay for it. We'll cover the tip. You just go, you eat, and you leave. Here's the pharmacy. We've let them know that you'll get a 7-day prescription for any prescriptions that you need. If you have a CPAP machine, you pick that up. Here's a gift card. I want you to go to Walmart and you buy clothing, get all your personal items. And here's transportation. We're going to stage transportation vans at every one of the hotels that you're staying in. If you have a car, great. If you don't, use the transportation we're going to provide. If you say, what's your motto? It's really to meet the needs of the community before they have to ask. And again, I've probably said this 5 times. We've been through this before, they haven't, and we understand that. So we should be 2-3 steps ahead of them, and that's what we try to be. We've been doing it like this for over 20 plus years. I think we really set the bar. But before I got this training, maybe 18, 19 years ago or so, we were doing it like this. And I knew I was doing it because that's the right thing to do. The thing I wasn't really prepared for is the way it made me feel, because this is the most rewarding thing you can possibly do at work. I mean, when people say, what keeps you up at night? It's not this. If something like this happens, I'm out the door because I'm helping people, and that's easy. But what I would say, when you see the reaction of the people and how people are so lovely and so nice to us, they're like, well, you're kind of evacuated too. You're away from your family. It's this community. It's just like we're in this together thing. And you can only get that by being there. You can't do that by making a phone call or sending someone on your behalf. You have to be there. And I saw this firsthand. And then when I got the training, all these things clicked like, this makes perfect sense. This Maslow hierarchy makes perfect sense, because just one example is I was dealing with a family and they were displaced from their home, and it looked like they weren't going to be able to move back into their house for maybe 6 months.
Oh, wow.
They were right next to this, and there's going to be a ton of remediation going on, and it's going to be 6 months. And obviously I'd been working with this family and I let them know. And surprisingly, they were like, well, okay. They're like, I'm like, okay, are your concerns? And they're like, no, we know that you're going to take care of us. Because one of the things about a response is you have to earn people's trust. We know that people don't trust big companies, but big companies are made up of sometimes really good people that really want to help. And you get there early and you do the right thing, people will trust you and earn that trust. We know it's not given. So I had earned their trust. Even I told them just horrible news about, you're not going to be able to move back into your house for 6 months. They were, okay, well, what's the next step? So I let them pick out a house to live in. It was a nice rental home. We furnished it. We did all those type of things. And now fast forward like 6 weeks, I think I was there. And I told them it's time for me to go home. I have been home in 6 weeks. I've got little children at the time. And they were like, well, what are we going to do? Now, these are people in their 50s. They've lived their whole life without me. But they had that attachment to me. And I understood that Maslow hierarchy. When I got the training, I'm like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Here's people. I've done everything for them. They were at the bottom of the pyramid. They were scared. They didn't know what was going to happen to them. They didn't know what was going to happen to their community. They were worried about their friends, their neighbors, their family. And then CSX came in and we took care of them and their basic needs. And they were handled with dignity. They were affirmed that this was a big deal, and we recognized it. We didn't say, oh, you know what, you'll be fine. And that's one of the things, I may be getting ahead of myself here and maybe some of the questions you have later, but one of the biggest mistakes that companies make is, well, if this happened to me, I'd be fine. Well, yeah, you're in the industry and you've seen this firsthand, you've lived it, so that mindset, it's going to set you up for failure. First of all, you presuppose that people's situations are just like yours, okay? We've had these situations in different communities that aren't as fortunate. We had a derailment in one community where 90% of the folks were on some type of a state or federal aid, which means they have what's in their pantry. They didn't bank. They didn't have a credit card. So if you take them away from their home, what are they going to do? You're talking about people who really need assistance, and they need it not in 3 to 4 days, but they need it now. And one of the things that we do when we get there is we ask for help in the community, because we're all in this together. The best way to earn trust, and this isn't just crisis response, this is in life, is to ask someone for help. Because I wouldn't ask anyone for help that I didn't trust. And that's the best way to earn trust as well. And I think where companies trip up to is they think that asking for help is a sign of giving up. And really, asking for help is the opposite. It's the sign that we're never going to give up. I think you have to, as a company, you just have to put that, oh, we've trained and we're ready and we don't need anyone's help because we got this. I think you got to put that aside. When it comes to helping people in the community and getting the environment straight, you have to do whatever it takes. And you have to put all that stuff aside and just do the best you can. If I had to say, what are you the most proud of? It's definitely pulling together, getting the community to put aside, you're a big company and you did this to us, to say accidents happen. We're going to get through this. You guys are going to take care of us. We trust you. Let's pull together. Let's get this behind us. Let's restore normalcy to the communities. I think that's really the experience that I've had in the 25, going on 26 years I've been doing this.
Mike, it is incredibly moving to hear you talk about your personal experience, but also the care and the pride that the care team at CSX takes in genuinely taking care of people during an incident and anticipating their needs. And I completely agree with you. When you care for someone, you take care of them, that builds trust automatically. And every incident we've talked about has an opportunity to present lessons learned. How does CSX evaluate and improve its standard of care and communications protocols with the local community? How do lessons learned get integrated into future outreach or other incidents?
Yeah, another great question. So I mentioned Avium, who I could plug them all day because they're just fantastic group to work with. But what they'll do is they'll go into the community after we're done and they'll interview people in the community, similar to this interview right here. And they'll ask them, what did CSX do for you? How did they treat you? What could they have done better? What could they have done differently? How did they treat your neighbors? I don't know any other railroad that's doing that. Again, it's to learn, because the response that we do 5 years ago, it can't be the response that we do today, because things change. Things change quickly. Expectations in the communities change. Just think of how the world has changed even since COVID. So we're constantly trying to learn and understand, because we want to help these communities. We want to do the best we can for them. And the best way to do that is listen to it right from them. So we'll get those interviews, we'll study them, and we'll learn from them.
And that's great too, because I think an organization such as CSX being so open to feedback to help better your responses and adapt to the community's needs is vital. But not every response takes place in a major metro area. As you said, you've got 20,000 plus miles of track. Not all of that is in a major city. How does CSX approach incidents in more rural or, as you've mentioned, maybe some under-resourced communities?
Yeah, those can be tricky, especially in the wintertime. We've had some struggles even getting to some of these folks. And a lot of times these are weather-related derailments. Again, it's that desire, that necessity to get there. And there's a will, there's a way. So we'll get there. Even if we have to take a train to get there, we'll do that. There are helicopters. There's all kinds of different ways we can get there. But we'll get there. But when we get there, what we have to do is we have to assess, okay, what are the communication needs? Because communication is key, especially localized. We'll call Verizon, AT&T, any cell phone service that is available, and they'll put up temporary towers. And we've had to do that in several different locations. One community in Pennsylvania, we put up a couple temporary towers. They had no cell coverage at all in this town, not a single bar. So we left the temporary towers up for this village long after we left. I was the most popular person in Pennsylvania because these kids could finally leave their house and walk around town and use their phones. It's kind of ironic that it takes a disaster or a big industrial accident like this to kind of flag a safety issue, right?
Yeah.
Because it should not be. A town in 2017 should not have no cell phone. It's just not safe. I mean, you think about the biggest safety device ever invented was maybe a cell phone. So that's one of the things that changed and came out of our derailment was they put up cell phone towers in that community. That's one of the good things that can come of it. But to answer your question, rural areas are very challenging on the communication side.
And finally, Mike, one last question before we wrap up. If there's one thing you wish communities, first responders, and emergency managers knew about CSX's standard of care, what would it be?
Well, I think we have our priorities in our order, that we do prioritize the community, even the little things. A few years ago, we'd announced the evacuation is over and we get the all clear, folks can go home. Well, that's not a time for us. It's over, we're done. I talk to my people all the time, like, this is the time we really need to step up because people are going to be in a hurry to get home. And you think about, we have a lot of elderly people. We want to make sure that they get home safely. They don't get in a rush. We're putting people back in their environments in a safe fashion. But then we're flipping the switch to make sure that people are compensated so they don't miss out on their house payments, their rent payments. A few years ago, we would make the announcement that we're going to invite the community to come in and get compensated for their trouble and for their time off and for their out-of-pocket expenses. We're going to open at 8 o'clock in the morning. And my chief legal officer at the time, she said, Mike, I want you to promise me that no one's going to wait more than 30 minutes for a check, that we've inconvenienced these people enough. I mean, this is at a very high level in our company, worried about the convenience of the residents that we've already inconvenienced. And I had this sinking feeling like, Erica, how am I going to control when people come? I mean, we just put this press release out. Could be 2,000 people come at 8 o'clock this morning. We didn't say, oh, please don't all come at once. Our computer systems are great, but they're designed to do our day job. They're not designed to handle this type of an event. It got me thinking, okay, what can I do to hit that mark, to make sure that people aren't waiting in kind of a second assault? You've been out of your house for 3 days. Now we want you to come stand in line for 5 hours to get a check. So now we developed a crisis response module, basically designed specifically to get people in, process their quote-unquote claim, and get them out. We spent quite a bit of money developing this app that can be run from your smartphone, from your tablet, from your computer, and it's specifically designed to this. So now within 15 minutes, folks can come in, they can get processed and leave with a check. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but to me, that's just indicative of the commitment that my company has made, not to inconvenience people unnecessarily, just fine-tune an already pretty good process. So to answer your question, the one thing I think I've talked about a lot of things, but is to get that mindset of if this happened to me, and plug yourself in, because I think a lot of us that work for big companies are pretty fortunate, and not everyone is like you. I think the response should be framed differently. It should be framed not if it happened to me, but maybe let's help everyone in the community, whether they're like me or not. I think if you take that away, I think you'd be much better off. And back to our motto, try to anticipate the needs of the community before they have to ask.
As you mentioned, you really do get the right perspective when you put yourself in their shoes and you understand what they're going through. It may be called CSX's standard of care, but my key takeaway from the discussion is it's all about genuine care for the community, for the impacted individuals and businesses. Mike, thank you so much for joining us and providing valuable insight into CSX's standard of care. Your perspective helps build the bridge between industry and community, and we appreciate the work CSX is doing to make rail safety and preparedness a shared priority.
Thanks, Erica. I appreciate you asking me. I wish we could have done this sooner, but circumstances didn't allow. But here we are. I enjoyed my time with you and willing to come talk to you whenever.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Hazmat Files. If you found today's episode helpful, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps others find this important content. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on the Hazmat Files.